All right. So we are at the final meeting, final scheduled meeting, that is, of the ATCP 72 Rule Revision Advisory Committee. For those just tuning in for the first time, my name is Ted Dahalski, the Environmental Health Technical Specialist for the Lodging and Campground Programs at DACCAP. For today's agenda, we'll start with roll call as we usually do. I did not receive any public appearances, so there will not be feedback from that. We will then choose a fee model. Jim had presented 3 different models at the last meeting, so we'll pick one of those 3, and then also revisit pest control and the DIIs, those death, injury, and illness reports. We were attempting to tease out just a little bit of that language yet, and then it's basically opened up to you guys for any final comments on the completed draft that we have thus far. Upcoming meeting dates, like I said, we don't have any scheduled, and we can maybe speak to this when we get to this part, but we will likely have a kind of a stand-in meeting once legal takes their crack at it and may change some of the language. Obviously, we're hoping the intent is not lost, but some of the language may change as we do our internal review and before we get to the public comment period. And after that, we will adjourn. So to start out, roll call, Greg. Amy?
Here.
Chrissy?
Here.
Lori? Emily?
Here.
Melissa?
Here.
Brandon?
Here.
Corey? Craig?
Here.
Jason? Jim?
Yep, I'm here.
Jason Hager? Trista?
Present.
Bill? Andy?
Here.
Jumani? And Dave.
Ted, this is Greg Stillman. I am here.
Okay. Hi, Greg. And I just saw Bill pop on too. And then any additional attendees, Reed?
Here.
And anyone else that I did not call? Looks like we have Sawyer County in attendance again. Brian?
Matt McKay.
And Matt and Linda?
Yep.
And was anyone else on call?
Julie McCallum as well.
Okay. Is that with Sawyer?
Yes, correct.
Yes.
Perfect. Okay, like I said, I did not receive any public appearance requests, so we'll move forward from there. We've come a long way since last November, so we've gone through this entire code, and now we're on to our final meeting here. Fee model, and then any final comments on the completed draft that we have. So again, a recap, Jim had proposed these 3 fee models. They're essentially a horse apiece. They generate the same targeted revenue, so there isn't too much of a difference. I think just looking at the trend, the Model 1 has a slightly higher pre-inspection than annual fee, whereas Model 2 has a higher annual fee compared to pre-inspection. And then the third, I couldn't really tell what the trend was there. It might be a little bit of a blend of the two.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. So we have the tourist rooming house fees, the hotel and motel fee, and then the specialty lodging fee. The big difference between what we're currently doing in ATCP 72 versus proposed is we have this range for each of these categories. So it's not just if you've got 5 or more rooms, you automatically get a hotel or motel. You may have multiple tourist rooming houses, and there will be a fee schedule associated with that. So, and then again, the total revenue that would be generated from these 3 different models, and then there is a built-in, how much of a percent increase is that, Jim?
5%.
Okay. a built-in 5% increase for 2027 is when that would kick in.
And Ted, I was asked if I was able to figure out what the percentage increase was over the last 14 years, 16 years. What the average increase was per year. So it took me a little bit of research, but I did find a formula that calculated your beginning fee, what your ending fee is, and then you put the time in, and it gives you a percent increase over time. And so because the fees are relatively similar, the increase for them was the same. But for TRHs, it was a 6% overall increase every year. And hotels and motels, the average was 3%. And so the reason for the TRHs was a higher percentage was the fee that we were actually charging for the TRHs didn't actually pay for the work that needed to be done. So that increase on the TRHs was a little higher than the hotels and motels, which have been pretty much keeping up all along with fees.
Thank you for that. Is there any just open discussion on these fees? One of them, fee models, one of these, not better or better than the other. We actually have really no opinion on which one to choose here. So I'm looking for influence on that. I tried to create a poll, but that is not working. So we will, if we need to take a vote, you can either verbally unmute yourself and say which number that is, or go ahead and put it in the chat. Either way, we can get that recorded through the transcript or in the chat. But I guess before we take a vote on it, is there any positive negatives for what we have here? Okay. So with that said, if you wouldn't mind, if you can put it in the chat, if you're unable to add a number into the chat or do not know how, feel free to just unmute yourself and say 1, 2, or 3 for these fee models.
That might be easier, Ted, just to have them put it in chat.
Yep. Yeah, either way, go ahead and put it in chat. And if you're unable to do that, unmute and verbally say it. So if you wouldn't mind doing that now. So it looks like Brandon kicked us off with a vote in there for number 1. I will continue on. Feel free to throw that in there as needed. And for anyone that didn't get the chance to add that comment, we can always take it at the very end. All right, so that concludes that on the fee model. We will move on to our proposed language. Okay, so 72.192 pest control. This had the concern with this language was the state or the local health department could order in a licensed pest control operator to rid a facility of vermin or pest or whatever it may be that's causing an imminent health hazard. Most commonly, the reason we would issue a closure order would be bed bugs. So that's kind of what we're after here. The concern was the availability of a licensed pest control operator in a rural area. So we didn't want to necessarily abandon the idea of us or health department requiring a licensed pest control operator, But I guess the compromise that we put in here, and this is the highlighted section, in the event that operator is unable to secure a licensed pest control operator, the temporary order issued pursuant to 72.262, which is the closure section, may be extended pursuant to 72.093B, which is the temporary orders section. So we would just extend the amount of time it would take to find a licensed pest control operator, but in that interim time, the facility or the room or the portion of the facility would still be ordered closed. Any comments on that? Okay.
Ted, it's Bill Elliott here.
Yep, go ahead, Bill.
Sorry, it took me a minute to unmute myself and pull up my notes from that. I'm trying to look at what we had originally. I know I was the one of the folks to suggest that we had an issue with it. I think what we had asked was just to have the opportunity to be able to work with you guys if they're not able to find somebody within the proximity to do it quickly enough. And so I guess I just want to verify what you're saying is by referring to the ATCP 72093B, that just goes into your emergency orders for closure. Is that right?
It allows us to extend that order of closure. So if we come across bed bugs in room 2, we would issue a closure for that room 2. It would be in effect for a course of 14 days. And basically what this is saying is if within those 14 days of that order, it could not be satisfied to have a licensed pest control operator in there to exterminate the bed bugs, we would then issue an extension on top of that to allow for up to, I think, 28 days. And if I'm not mistaken, Jim, this can be extended indefinitely, if not, right?
Yeah, there's three pieces to a temporary order. The first is 14 days. Then you're able to extend for 14 days, and then you can issue a final temporary order, which would say that that room or that area must remain closed until it can be inspected and the correction verified by the department. And so this actually gives us, enough time to work with an operator to make sure that the problem is remediated. What we're trying to resolve is that we don't have a facility that perpetually just doesn't do anything with the room and the pests are still there and just doesn't operate with it. At some point, there has to be a remedy to the issue.
Right.
But this gives us an opportunity to say, yes, as long as you're not using that room and we've closed that room, you've got additional time to figure out how you're going to remedy that problem. Whether it's, you're trying to do it yourself, or whether, you really need to have a professional in there to actually take care of the problem.
Okay, thank you. It
Yeah.
seems to me like that reconciles what we were looking for, and I guess I'd ask any of the other lodging operators to speak up if they disagree. But it seems to me that's what we were looking for. We just wanted to make sure that in some of those rural areas, especially where we have problems from, well, as you guys I'm sure know, from pest control or pool operators, whoever, or pool contractors, whoever it may be, sometimes hard for us to
Yep.
get those services.
Yeah, Ted and I really, put our heads together on this to try to think of in the spirit of what you were asking for. And we're like, there's not really anything less we could do than a temporary order in that situation. And so, we can issue a final temporary order, and the room remains closed, and we can give an extended period of time to try to bring resolution to the issue. But at some specified point in time, we are going to have a remediation of the problem.
Right. And I think our industry would agree. None of us want to be sitting in a room that has these problems for a long period of time.
Right. Yeah. And actually, Bill, just a little background on this is that this was something that I had actually worked with the lodging industry on probably 10 or more years ago to actually put together the bug bed policy for the department was actually in cooperation with the Lodging Association.
Oh, that's great. Do you work with Trisha on it?
Yes, I did.
Oh, that's great. That's great.
Okay. I think we're settled on that highlighted part being in there then. Going on to E here, revisit the death, injury, illness reports. So these are instances where EMS is called out to the facility due to a patron either dying, becoming injured, or becoming ill at the facility. Concern here was the scope was a little too wide. Hotels, motels uh, may have multiple reasons why EMS or police might show up, whether it be crime or drug related overdoses or heart attacks, whatever it may be. Our compromise here, or our way to try to dial in here is a report. The licensee or their designee shall report an incident that results in death, injury, or food, waterborne, or other communicable illness where an emergency medical service response is required relating to any provision in Chapter ATCP 72. So we're really not interested in those previously mentioned EMS calls. This would be specific to any of the sections you would find up above in the code. You know, whether it be someone slips in the shower and breaks a bone or hits their head or something of that sort and requires EMS, that would be something we would like to know about. But if they have a heart attack while walking down the hall, that is not something that would be reported back to us. Any comments on that phrase that's in the highlighted section?
Ted, this is Brandon. I'm sure I'll
Sure.
defer to Bill a little bit here too, but as a
Mhm.
lodging operator, and I feel that's about as good of spot as we were trying to get to
Okay.
be honest. And again, I'll defer the Bill as well. And I know there's some other operators here, but when we tried to talk about this, I think Bill and I spent about 45 minutes trying to land on where it made sense, just like you guys have. And so I at least want to go on the record here to say that based on our conversations, based on our desires, I think this is as close as we can get.
Okay. Bill, did you want to piggyback off of that or?
Yeah, I guess I'd like to hear from some of the other operators on the call if we can. I think some of I really appreciate that you guys are working on this and trying to find the solution. I think that some of the questions that came up in some of our conversations would still be in my head. You know, making sure that we have our management and our staff trained to know what they have to call about and what they don't. You know, what type of legal liabilities we have when something is called versus when you guys are contacted versus when you're not. So I think some of those are out there, but I think we're certainly way closer with this. But I'd certainly like to hear the feedback of some of the other lodging operators on here to see how you feel, if this makes you more easy with the language than what we discussed before.
And Bill, I would suggest that I'm kind of volunteering Ted here. But if this is something that we ultimately move forward with, we certainly could put together a fact sheet for industry that kind of helps explain the types of things that operators would need to report. And it would kind of be like a cheat sheet that they would be able to use that would kind of guide them on the types of things that they would need to report to the department.
I know our general counsel would be quite happy to have a sheet on hand with that.
Okay.
This is Chrissy. I'm from the Dells. I think the hardest part as an operator is what's gonna maybe potentially cause some issue here is just, um, first of all, I mean, I think it's hard to try to understand from, an incident report perspective. A lot of the times, and I think there's a difference between what I would consider like a severe incident versus, you know, a guest had an allergic reaction and had to call the EMS. You know what I mean? I think there's some vagueness there on what would be injury or illness. And I think the other really difficult part is unfortunately the fact that a lot of the times we as operators are not included in what would be considered what happens after emergency services are involved. I'll give an example. You know, we had and I'll go back to the allergy example. We had a child who was staying in one of our units and had a anaphylactic shock, reaction due to, some type of allergy she had. And I mean, she was obviously incredibly ill and needed EMS to assist. We don't know what happened to her. We don't know if she ended up being okay. We as the operator, a lot of times in some of these scenarios, once emergency services is called and involved, we a lot of the time are left with no further information. So I think if, the reporting of this is going to be important, I think we need to be understanding that a lot of the times the operator may not be informed as to what type of injury or how it happened or what those scenarios are. So I think we just need to be kind of aware that sometimes we may not have that information. So I think in order to get the people who have the licenses, we might need some education on like, you may only be able to provide information that you know. So I think just maybe keeping that open for discussion, or like Brandon had mentioned, I definitely think those of us who have, legal representation, they're going to want to maybe have a little bit more clarification on what's being required. And then I think it's just going to be difficult to know, where that line is of what's being reported. Same thing too on the communicable illness side. A lot of times we don't know until either maybe the guest has left or it's a week later, or you know what I mean? I think we went through a lot of that with the bed bug situation as well. You know what I mean? When we talked about those types of things. So I think it's just going to take some additional education, and maybe like you mentioned, there's a form or there's a guidance sheet that we can provide so that people are more apt to try to help with the reporting. Because I think if we make the reporting too thorough for that information they have, I think it's going to encourage people to be like, well, I don't know, so I'm not going to report anything.
Yep.
Jim or Reed, do you have, I guess the pool has had this provision in there the longest, the pool code. Do you have examples of where this data collection has benefited the state and rulemaking in the future, or policy development or anything of that sort?
Yeah, I know that we looked at that when we did the rule revision. It's too bad Mary Ellen wasn't here because she would probably be able to tell you right off the top of your head. But I know that there's a couple provisions that I can think of that had one was the breath holding.
Okay, yep.
And the other one was making sure that children under the age of 12 and adult has to be present. Because we were seeing that most of the near drownings and deaths were happening when it was kids.
Unsupervised, yep.
Unsupervised, yep.
Okay. Yeah,
So,
go ahead.
But no, that's I mean, that's what we kind of use the data for, is to determine, are there areas in the code that maybe we don't need to have any longer? or can be less of a requirement, or other areas that we maybe need to focus on because we're starting to see an emerging trend in that type of illness or injury. And so it gives us the ability to have these discussions in the future based on the data and what we're seeing, um, out in the industry.
Right. Yeah, and it'll be interesting to see how this evolves or molds after our legal looks at it as well. So
Yep.
there will still be time for influence or input on this. This isn't
Yep.
the end of the line here. We haven't even gotten to public comment. So
Yeah,
um,
my expectation is that the death, injury, and illness reporting that's actually done in connection with the provision in 72 are going to be very few. When
yes.
you filter out all the things that may require an emergency response from your facility, there's probably going to be a handful every year that actually fit into what we're looking for here.
My only other suggestion would be is a lot of the times too, the people who, and again, I'm speaking only from my own experience, I think the next business day might be tough in some scenarios. A
Mm.
lot of the times, by the time you get information from whoever responded, and that's if you get that information in a timely fashion as well, I'm just wondering that might be a tight turnaround, maybe give them another day or two to, again, I think we're obviously hoping if it's a very serious scenario, you're obviously going to be made aware. But again, like
Mhm.
going back to the example I gave where the young person had a reaction, we didn't know that situation until they had already departed.
Sure.
So, and then you have to coordinate with emergency services. What can they give you information? I mean, I'm just wondering, like I said, we certainly don't want to make it unattainable that people just don't report anything, but I think that might be an unrealistic expectation to be able to get that information to report it with based on the severity of the incident.
Mm-hmm. And to go back to Jim and Reed, this is really an information gathering section. I don't know that this has ever been used for enforcement or I won't say retaliation, but a cause and effect. You didn't report, so then this happens. Am I correct in saying that?
Yeah. And I would say that, there's a lot of times, and we've been doing this with swimming pools for many years now. But there's many times where we don't have the information. A lot of times what's getting reported to us was that there was an incident and that's it. And they may not even know all of the information. And we may have to contact the police or whatever to actually find out more information. Because like you said, Chrissy, you're not necessarily having that information reported back to you. It's more that here was an incident where EMS was called. It's not indicating any type of blame at that point, or whether it was associated with the hotel or not. It was that this was an incident that was reported.
And
And
I
that's
think
really,
maybe clarifying that might help.
yeah,
And I don't know if this is the place where you would have that language, but I think letting people know like, hey, you're not required to have cause, effect, result, final
Mm-hmm.
scenario in that report. Maybe it's just saying, hey, we had an incident here. EMS was dispatched, police was here. Because a lot of the times, we'll try to follow up just for general information as well. And the police won't give us any information, especially if EMS is involved due to HIPAA laws and all those other things. Like
Sure.
they're going to tell us if we need to contact you for anything else, we'll let you know. So I think maybe in that section, letting people know, and like I said, I think your fact sheet will cover a lot of that. Just saying like, hey, we're trying to just get information, and if we find we need more, we can certainly pursue further. But I think helping them understand that if you don't have every single detail of what took place, that's fine. We may not, things may develop further down, but I think,
Yep.
again, giving those operators the opportunity to let them know, hey, this is just, we're trying to get some information. We want to know what's going on. And then I think eventually too, having what the purpose of that information would be used for. I know
Yep.
some operators are like, well, what do I need to tell them for? It's not my fault. And they automatically assume we're trying to come after them for, cause and effect reasons, which is going to, I think, encourage people to not want to do it as well.
Mhm.
And Chrissy, maybe it would even be more specific if we said where the emergency medical response is initiated by the lodging facility.
Yeah, I think that would be
Relating to any
fantastic.
provision in 72, because
Yep.
you have 1,000 guests staying there, and like you said, you or may or may not be involved in an individual's call to EMS, which may be something that's unrelated to their stay at your facility.
In same scenario too, if another guest decides to call, that's not
Mhm.
involved with it. We've had scenarios where other guests who are not involved in an incident at all, they're simply, we call them citizen journalists, where they're, doing those kinds of things. But even in a smaller scenario too, you know what I mean? We may not know until EMS arrives that someone called.
Right.
So those, I think, absolutely helping address that to put the operators kind of, I don't want to use the words like mind at ease, but a little bit to be like, hey, like if you, the resort, or you, the tourist rooming house, or you, the campground, had to call EMS for something, that may be a better clarification. Because again, I think I read that and think, oh my gosh, every time EMS is called, holy moly, I'd be filing reports left and right. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? And a lot of the times we have no idea what's happening until either we get the opportunity to speak with EMS, and not every property has security departments like we do. Not every place has 24-hour monitoring of those kinds of things, So I think maybe helping clarify, like if you, the operator, are reaching out to emergency services, that may be easier to try to get more buy-in of the operators to do so that you can get that important information when it comes to, helping make rules around the safety of the general public.
I do think that initiated by the lodging facility really goes a long way, Jim, and that's a great idea. I was thinking before that about Northwoods properties or Door County properties, the folks that don't always have even front desk staff 24/7. If there's an ambulance that's there overnight, maybe they know about it, but they have no idea why. So I think that really could help solve a lot of our concerns.
Good.
Ted, just a thought. Could you make a note to tie that to certain licensing criteria? Because there's not management on site at a tourist rooming house where the rental party of a tourist rooming house would have to call emergency services on their own. But
I
listening
think
to
that's
Chrissy,
kind of what Bill was saying. The manager or person in charge does not have to be there during rental.
Yeah, I think you could probably address that maybe by initiated by the lodging facility or once reported to the lodging facility.
Yes.
There's something along those lines. Once the operator is aware of it, it makes sense to put us on the clock, I think, so to speak.
Sure.
It's more just not requiring us to do something when we don't know what happened, right?
Right. Yep. Yep. I get it. Okay. I guess the reports that I'm expecting to receive would be something along the lines of a fire or someone getting injured, falling in the building in the stairwell or something of that sort would be the expected reports to receive from
And
this
then
section.
not to beat this to death, because I don't want to, but I think too, maybe getting some type of range or continuum of what is an injury.
Okay.
Severity.
Severity.
Severity of injury. Every time a kid slips and trips and skins his knee is one thing, but if they continue to trip on the same entryway because the lip of concrete isn't the right, you know what I mean? Like, I think
Right,
there's
yep.
helping them know that, hey, these are not, we have reports for, I hate to say it, bee stings. We have reports for I got sunburnt. We have reports for, I fell asleep in the chair and now I'm just thinking helping from defining
Right.
what is an injury might be helpful as well.
Well, and hopefully parents aren't calling EMS for a scraped knee.
I would love to say that doesn't happen, but I don't have nearly as much time to have everybody know what EMS does get called, unfortunately, when it comes to our everyday. So
Well, it's good discussion. I appreciate everyone's feedback on these two. Feel better about the 25 now, the section 25 here. So thank you for that feedback. From here, we will then open this up to the whole draft as is. If there's anything pressing that you feel needs to be readdressed, or if you have a comment from paging through this on your own and you want something re-explained or you have a comment on it, feel free to provide that feedback now.
Ted, is
Ed,
there a way to get a copy of this? Again, I know it's going to go to legal and we'll see something at the end.
Yeah,
but-
I emailed a copy. I can email you personally a copy, but I
Okay.
did send one to the last meeting invite, and then these are also on our webpage too.
Okay,
I
let
have
me
a
double
rule
check.
revision.
My apologies for that.
I will say we did receive one comment. This is from Bill, or not Bill, sorry, Dave Bond, but a modification to backflow prevention. He had an incident where a backflow screw-on device was required on something that already had backflow and had caused some damage. So I kind of changed this around. The proposed would be a backflow or back siphonage prevention device shall be integrated into or installed onto plumbing fixtures where the potential for contamination of the potable water supply exists. So that would kind of capture those specific plumbing fixtures that already have backflow built into them. Those would not need any type of duplicate backflow added on. So that was an example of one comment that we had received.
Ed, did you want to just kind of share with them? We kind of talked about criticality in the definitions, but kind of show them how that actually looks in the rule and
Yeah.
kind of see it here, but maybe just kind of explain that to them.
Yeah, so again, the way back when last November, I think we had brought up the idea of priority foundation, and core items. And they're going to be denoted with this superscript P or PF, or they're just not going to have anything on them. Trying to find one. It'll just be empty, like this one right here. There's nothing on there. That would be a core item. P or priority are items that, if not addressed, could lead to death, illness, or injury. A priority foundation are items that, if left unaddressed over time, or if compounded with other priority foundations, can develop into a priority item, which then leads to death, illness, or injury. And then core items are just kind of your generic general maintenance.
SSOPs.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Maintain clean, good repair standards to certain design standards. So we did go through, as we were going through this however many times now, we have been adding in the Ps, the PFs, and the cores, partly from how these were voted on in the other codes. So the Rec Ed code, there's some crossover between some of the themes that we have in that code and this code. And then also a while back, we did have internal work groups that identified priority foundation and core with the current code. And we kind of adapted what those work groups did and applied it to this new language. So you will see these funny looking PFs and nothing. That's what that corresponds to. And then Reed or Jim, I don't know if you want to speak to what happens next now. Obviously, we have the internal review and then moving in from, I guess, once that wraps up and then transitioning into public comment, how that kind of moves forward.
Yeah, so once it gets through internal review, then we need to take the rule back to the board and have the DATCAP board approve us to move forward with public hearings. And then we would submit to the clearinghouse. And then 30 days after the draft is submitted to the clearinghouse, we can hold public hearings. And so we kind of figured that would happen either towards the end of the year or into next year, depending upon when the rule can actually get in front of the Ag Board. And then we would have 4 to 5 public hearings around the state to give people ample opportunity to provide comment. And then after that, we would prepare a final report to the legislature, which would address all of the clearinghouse comments, all of the public hearing comments, and then that would get submitted to the legislature. And then from there, it's kind of out of our hands at that point, and it makes its way through both houses and to the Joint Committee on Administrative Rules. And if it makes it through all of that, then they set a passage date, and it goes into effect 90 days after it is published in the Register.
Thanks. Thank you for that summary. Trista, you have a question?
Yeah, I do have a couple questions.
Mhm.
One is, I see on the lodging webpage for DATCAP that we do have the proposed draft language
Mhm.
for each of the sections that we talked about at our meetings.
Mm-hmm.
Where can I find one that is proposed language for the entire code?
It was attached to the meeting invite for this meeting.
For this meeting? Okay.
Yep.
All right, perfect.
If you need me to send that again to you, let me know. Otherwise, it will be posted on that same webpage after this meeting concludes.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, I can find that.
Okay.
And then the second part is with WildAB EH, our agent programs, we're all talking about this revision and wondering what is the, I guess, ideal timeframe for us to provide comment internally to DATCAP before it gets out to like public comment?
Anytime.
Okay. Is there a time that's too late? Like
After,
the
after
next,
yeah, after public hearing, you know, we have, once we prepare the final report to the legislature, that's when, you know, we're kind of done making revisions at that point. So, you know, basically any time from now through public hearing, through the time we'll continue to take comments, I think 14 days after we have public hearings. So any time from now until then, we're always open to take comments and suggestions.
okay, all right, that's very helpful. Thank you.
Chrissy, you have a question?
Yes, I do. So something that I don't know, I am scrubbing through the document as well, just trying to see if I can find anywhere. I know something that has been brought up a couple different times. I've heard as an operator, but also as a guest and just also in general. Do we have language in this draft that talks about, you know, tourist rooming houses in capacity, meaning I have a 2,400 square foot home that is a tourist rooming house, is licensed, yada, yada. That means it would have room for X amount of guests.
The only thing that we have, and we are not doing the 2-person per bedroom
Yep,
POUTS calculation.
right?
We just have the spacing and number of occupants in a sleeping room. So
Okay,
what we put in here is you have to have a 3-foot, trying to read through this.
It's in B. In
In
B.
B, you see it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. I saw the
Yeah.
mattress and, yep, one occupant
three-
for,
3
you don't
feet
want to
in width.
be, you don't want to
Mhm.
be saying 3 people can sleep in a twin bed. Like, I get that.
Correct. Yeah.
But
So
as far as like the occupancy or capacity, and the reason I bring that up is we do experience, not in just the resort area, but in, lake homes and that kinds of stuff, where we get guests who, of course, are not upfront about the amount of people they plan on having in the unit. And unfortunately, not all the time are they overnight guests. And it's obviously causing, as you guys can imagine, not just from the homes or other tourist rooming houses that are near those area, but it's also presenting an issue with parking. It presents an issue with fire hazard. It presents issues with those kinds of things. I know we talked briefly about this when we reviewed this section, but I do believe that at least here recently in the Dells, this is becoming a larger issue. We are getting a lot of complaints about tourist rooming houses or vacation rentals or however you want to call it. We also experience it as well in the resort, the hotel licensed category as well, about people just having there's an unsafe amount of people in one area. Is there an opportunity to try to suggest some type of guidance for something like that?
That's something that's typically going to be handled at the local level
Okay,
by zoning.
okay,
And you're going to start to see more and more. I think Lake Delton has already done this, where they're actually doing their own inspections of
sure.
these additional things that fall scope of the lodging rule and are more
Okay,
of noise and occupancy and garbage and parking and those type of things that
okay,
are being handled at the local level. Because that's who's going to be responding to these as well. It's probably going to be law enforcement a lot of times. And so we wanted to respect what zoning was trying to do,
okay,
but yet it's not really our role to deal with those issues. And that's why we say shall not exceed the requirements that we established or the posted occupancy limit, which is
okay.
enforced by the local governmental agency. So if the local governmental agency is requiring you to put an occupancy and post that, and it says 10 and they show up and you've got 20 people there, they're going to deal with that, either through a enforcement or citation or whatever. From our point of view, what we were trying to get at is that, if we calculate that you can only have 10 occupants in your tourist rooming house, and we see online that you're advertising for 15 or 20, then we have a problem, and that's what we're going to address. Um, but the individual day-to-day operations of what's going on, that's something that's probably going to be handled more at the local level.
Okay, appreciate it. Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, anything else from anyone else? If not, oh, go ahead.
Ted, Matt here.
Mhm.
I had a question, I guess, in regards to exits from sleeping rooms in tourist rooming houses,
Mhm.
which is under 7218 building structures and safety. Has that language really changed? I mean, from what I read through, it really has stayed the same as what DSPS has published in the past. It's just your own version, your own words, I guess, but it's essentially saying the same thing that, so where we're getting questions about is for bedrooms in the basement and having 2 exits. Now, if there is a room in the basement, that a bedroom in the basement, so it has a door, as long as that basement has 2 means of egress, that bedroom itself does not necessarily have to have a window in it. Is that correct?
Right. If they're using the window as an exit, then it's the egress window in that bedroom, each bedroom.
If they don't have 2 means of egress in the rest of that basement,
Right.
then each bedroom would have to have an
Mhm.
egress window.
Correct.
But if that bedroom did not have a window, but as long as the basement had 2 means of egress, so the main stairway going upstairs and a walkout door, for example, that would serve those 2
That would meet this
requirements.
provision. Yes.
Yep. And that's what I come to understand. And I'm just been getting some flack from others that have been listening to the meetings, and they're trying to tell me otherwise. So I just wanted to make sure that nothing has changed, I guess, from what way we've been doing it in the past.
Correct. Yep. And
Okay.
this is the same language that's currently in that policy, the lodging structural guidance policy.
Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. All right. If you have any more feedback or questions and want to ask them, you may stay on and do so. That's it. That's all the material that I have. Before you do exit, if you wouldn't mind throwing in the chat or verbally saying which fee model you would prefer, that 1, 2, or 3, please do that. But I appreciate everyone's input over the many months of looking through this. There's a lot of material that has changed, but it's definitely been something that has been needed. A lot has changed since 1978, and how lodging is conducted in Wisconsin. So I think this code better reflects and better protects than our current code. And I appreciate the feedback and input that all of you have provided for it. So with that said, that concludes the meeting.
Thank you, Ted, for everything
Thanks,
you've
Ted.
done.
Thank you guys.
Yep, absolutely.
Work. Yeah, we appreciate it.
Thanks, Ted.
Thank you.